It's interesting. Coca-Cola is not just messing with Haiti. They're messing with Palestine. They're messing with Colombia. These multinationals are not just that, right? They are what we mean when we say U.S. empire.
This is Max Rameau, strategist, theorist, author, and organizer with Pan-African Community Action, and you are listening to The Next World, a podcast about building movements. Once a month on this show, we will explore and celebrate the work of poor people's movements, particularly in the U.S. We will highlight innovative and powerful organizing campaigns and community building led by women, LGBTQ folks, Black communities, and other people of color that are pushing the boundaries and have the potential to transform this society. This episode is part 2 of a special series we're doing on Haiti and the turmoil and the organizing going on there. Our guest today is Mamyrah Prosper, the International Coordinator for Community Movement Builders and Assistant Professor of Global and International Studies at the University of California in Irvine, California. Mamyrah joined us from her home in Haiti, where she lives part-time. So Mamyrah, thank you for coming and welcome.
Thank you for having me, Max.
So I want to spend a little time on what happened here with Haitian President Jovenel Moïse. Moïse is put into office in clearly under a cloud. So where is he in 2021 in terms of has he shored up support in one sector or another? Is he now popular? Because then people are saying, wow, we really made a mistake with this guy. He really turned out great.
I mean, by February 2021, there's actually a huge march on February 28th, this time called by the Protestant sector, right? So talk about,
which is in a minority in Haiti. Haiti's a Catholic country.
Well, since the 90s, Haiti has shifted to become a majority Protestant country, actually. Wow. So Catholics have lost ground. And in this case, as we were seeing, right, in the mid-20th century, the importance of liberation theology coming out of the Catholic Church, it was something to see that the Protestants had decided to join the efforts of people who are mobilizing over the last 3 years, right, since 2018, July, to amplify this demand that he stepped down. And, they were really accentuating the peaceful nature of their march. They even did little actions like bringing flowers to the police, and not just the Protestants were there, right? The folks who usually come to protest also swelled the streets. But you started to see that several sectors were putting out statements saying, you need to step down, right? That you've held this country hostage long enough and that we really need to move on from you.
And your term is over. So it's not just like we want you to leave right. If we don't like you, but your term is actually over.
Right. Yeah. And even when people had demanded in February 2019 that he step down, it wasn't just simply because they didn't like him. It was because the Court of Audit reports had shown that he was named in this scandal. And people kept saying, the first citizen of the nation can't be a thief. And right, so that he should step down in order to face trial. It wasn't just step down and then do the usual, get on a plane and leave, but let's start a process of actually keeping people accountable, right, when they steal state money. But by February 2020, everyone essentially, even also, as you mentioned earlier, the private sector, some of them, not all of them, had also put out statements echoing the same sentiments as the rest of the people who had been on the streets for a long time. Mm-hmm. So by February 2021, he's extremely disliked and unwanted. But February 8th, he retires all of the people he claimed, including police, national police officers and Supreme Court judges that he claimed had been organizing a coup d'etat against him. He retires them. And in the same decree, he ends up transforming more than 8,000 acres of protected lands into a free trade zone to be managed by the oligarch André Apped, who had been a founding member of the Groupe des 184 that had organized the second coup d'etat against Jean-Bertrand Aristide in 2004 to set up a plantation of a non-edible crop, stevia, towards the production of a sweetener for Coca-Cola, right? So when we hear today that somehow Jovenel Moïse was fighting for the Haitian people against the oligarchy, it's a joke. Because if you look at his record, he's protecting Bidjo, for example, who has a free trade zone that is a port, which means he can bring in whatever he wants into Haiti and export whatever he wants without any kind of state oversight. And today you have, the government has reported there's more than 500,000 guns, illegal guns circulating in Haiti that are coming out of the United States. And we're all scratching our head wondering where it's coming from, right? When this guy has his own port, which means also free trade zones means they're not paying any taxes. And it also means that the government had subsidized the creation of the port using state funds, in this case, the Petro-Caribe funds. So this is a sign that there is obviously factions within the oligarchy, right? That there's competition. The pot in Haiti is pretty small. So as Jovenel is attacking people in the energy sector, like, Dimitri Vogue, and he's going after Reginald Boulos, right, who controls, some of the supermarkets and other types of car import, car selling businesses. He's attacking them. But he's also lifting up Andrea Ped, right, by gifting him 8,000 acres of agricultural lands and $18 million of the state to start his plantation. And he's not touching Bijou, who has his private port. So it's more complicated than saying, right, the oligarchs hated him, rather than saying there's a faction of them who are competing with others who wanted to eliminate him, while others found him very useful.
Yeah. And just to underscore a couple of the points that you raised, you put a lot in there to unpack, but just to underscore a couple of points, he's facing all kinds of obstacles since he's been in power, all kinds of obstacles to moving his agenda. And basically he, for all intents and purposes, he dissolves the Senate.
Mm-hmm. Well, he doesn't dissolve it. He allows their mandates to expire,
which
right?
ends up having the same
yes.
thing.
But yes,
he allows their terms to expire.
2/3 of the Senate had been their mandates had been expired, and in the Chamber of Deputies, almost all of them, which means there was never any quorum for the parliament to be able to run and make laws.
The equivalent would be in the United States if there was no
Congress.
In the Congress, if there was no elections for senators.
Yes.
If they went 4 years with no election
and
for
House
senators,
of Representatives, nobody
have to represent. So that would mean if there was no election for senators over the course of 2 election cycles, 2/3 of the senators would be gone. There'd be no senators from those representing those states. So and as a result, then there was no quorum, and they were not able to vote. He also had members of the Supreme Court either retired or arrested. He had one member who was arrested. So he made the government non-functional.
Yes.
And because it was non-functional, he was left with no choice except to operate by decree.
Yes. And he was already doing the decree, passing decrees when there was actually, a fully functional parliament. He was already doing that. Right. And this is a move that Michel Martelly was also doing. When his term, and he had
no one to complain. Now there's no one to complain because there's no quorum, so they can't. They're no longer in office.
Exactly.
And then
that was since January 2020, right? And yet the international community continued to deal with him single-handedly as the only representative of power in Haiti, and thought, well, that seems normal, right? Yeah. We pride ourselves, when Congress is debating that's a true sign of democratic rule. But when it comes to Haiti, you're sitting there with one president that everybody hates, by the way, and that his term has ended, and there is no other checks and balances, but that's perfectly normal to sit with him, right? And then you call that democracy.
Yeah. So when we have then in having this kind of power, in addition to doing things with the government, he's actively named in investigations in other criminal cases as someone who's engaging in corrupt practices, illegal activities, bringing in guns in the country. There's all kinds of stuff that he's being named in. Mm-hmm. And throughout this time, he's being named in court documents, the United States continues to support his being there.
Absolutely.
And he's doing all this stuff, building, and then undermining these factions inside of the wealthy classes, the ruling classes, the oligarchy in Haiti. And he's really trying to get his fingers, if it's fair to say, in different pots of money that are going on. And that's creating some alliances and also destroying alliances and all kinds of. So would it be fair to say that in February 2021, this is not a popular president inside of Haiti.
It's fair.
It's fair to say, right?
And I'll add also, he has not only he's retired these folks he claimed were organizing a coup against him. He's created this free trade zone right on agricultural land, which means evicted people who were living there, essentially growing their food there.
Right. This was not empty desert land.
Right. This is what they keep claiming. No one was doing anything with the land. And actually, there are several hectares of land, acres of land that were being controlled by this Haitian feminist organization that had an organic farm there. They're like, well, we were there, right? As an example of the fact that the land was not empty. But also, all the accusations is also, and to the point that you made about the guns circulating freely in the country, is that you've had, even the state was reporting that 35% of the territory was controlled by gangs, right? Up to 95 gangs owned, in the Port-au-Prince metropolitan area alone. And what you were seeing with the mobilizations that started in July, not only you had repression against protesters, right? People being executed and shot during protests, but massacres happening in particularly the neighborhoods that are known for their militancy, the first one being La Saline in November 2018. And even the reports that have come out of Harvard Law Clinic, come out of the human rights organizations in Haiti, and the United Nations clearly show that several people that were higher up in the power structure were aware that this was going to happen. They knew when it was happening. This happened in broad daylight, 71 people butchered, 11 women collectively raped, right? That this was happening and the police stood by and did nothing. And, Jovenel Moïse is known for
people
tweeting.
In power were aware in advance.
They were aware.
Planned action.
Yes. And
spontaneous.
If you look at, Jovenel Moïse's Twitter feed, he's tweeting all the time. Silence, complete silence about this massacre. And as a matter of fact, just in June, when I was here, a month before his assassination, there were 2 massacres that took place. Again, the police didn't intervene. The army didn't do anything. I don't even know what they do for real. And the government said nothing, as if this had never, ever happened. So for folks to have your president, right, tweet about everything that he claims he's doing and yet be silent when there are massacres taking place, right? The month of June alone, 150 people were butchered. That's, what's been recorded. And yet there's been no discussion whatsoever coming out of the state about these gruesome events. It's as if it never actually happened.
Yeah.
So to folks, this is a condoning by the state, and if not, actually orchestrated by the state.
Yeah. And so as a result of this, of his illegitimacy and the actions that he's taking, the criminality there in Haiti, then there are these massive protests against him. There's massive mobilization like that I haven't seen certainly in my lifetime, mobilizing against Moïse, and this was happening in 2021 in the early part, certainly in February, around the time that his term was to expire.
Yes, right? And this is the culmination of 3 years worth of protests since July 2018, with the first, what we call pays look, and some other folks call it a general strike, right? When there was 3 days of complete shutdown of the country after Moïse had declared that he was going to raise taxes on gas prices after he had exited Haiti from the Venezuela's Petro-Caribe agreement, right, and put us back on the market. People had already started to protest him. And by August 2018, you had what people started calling the Petro Challenge was launched. And people started asking the question, where are the Petro-Caribe funds? More than $2 billion worth were squandered, stolen by officials of this party. And the protests at that point weren't targeting him. They were just saying, where is the money? And we asked the president of this nation, illegitimate that he may be, to push for this investigation to happen. And instead, he was making declarations like, as long as I'm in power, this trial will not happen. While he's tweeting something very different to the international public, right? He's saying very different things when he's within the borders of the country, right? Mm-hmm. But after months and months of popular pressure, sit-ins, marches, and even with a massacre that was supposed to really prevent people from taking to the streets. And I remember this, I had come to Haiti for the November 18, 2018 march. And at some point, we're standing there under Michel Martelly's quack bridge that he spent $16 million on. And I don't even know what it is. I can share some pictures with you and you'll say, what is this? And how did it come to cost $6 million? But we're all sitting there. It's now known as the Carrefour Resistance, the intersection of the bridge to nowhere. And
Yeah.
people have renamed it the corner of resistance, because that's where a lot of the marches start. And we're standing there and we're waiting for the folks who live, right, in La Saline, in Cité Soleil, right, in these areas that are considered red zones where even the police can't go because the gangs control it. And we're waiting for them to come because we know that just a week before, they've experienced a serious, right, offensive, like a massacre, because they were preventing them from coming. And when these
From
people
participating in the protest.
From participating, but when they start coming anyway, like en masse, it's like goosebumps, right? To see that these people, even with this major setback, were still willing to come and join with folks around the city to do this march together, right? So people were, since 2008, every month there was a major march, right? So finally the Court
Since
of
2018.
2018, sorry.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the Court of Audits ends up publishing an initial report. And from the beginning, Jovenel Moïse is right in the middle of the scandal. And everyone's like, aha, that's why you didn't want us to do this investigation, right?
It's because you're right in the middle of it.
You're right in the middle of it. So by February 2019, everyone's like, that's it. We're done with you. We didn't want you to begin with. You're named in the scandal. You're a thief. And you should set an example by stepping down and facing trial. Of course, that doesn't happen. And instead, you see not only are the gangs gaining more ground and more power, he's announced, that the Haitian armed forces are officially reestablished, right? You can see that he's starting to make sure that he's going to control, right, people. And he's going to control people by force.
Yeah, he's building up the security state.
He's
building up
pretty much.
Right. So there's not development happening. There's not relief for poverty. But what there is there's an increased ability to respond to protests through repression.
And we see that by May 2020, 13 of the gangs met and they formed what they call the G9, so sort of like borrowing some language from the United Nations.
Yeah. The
G9 they and all of that, they're doing this on Twitter, on WhatsApp, right? So they're very open. Everybody knows where they live, right? But yet they can't be caught. By June 2020, he's issued another decree that's making it mandatory for all citizens to apply and use a new national identification card. So he's making it impossible. You can't open a bank account. You can't do anything unless you get this new ID. And his wife actually was the one who had facilitated this contract with this German firm called Demalog. So everyone's like, so you're delaying all kinds of elections. You're creating a new national ID. So people already see that this is a preparation for stealing the next elections, right? By November, he's created this National Intelligence Agency, not to obviously find where the gangs are, as if they don't know where they are, because, the gang leader, Bobby Q, as he's called, right, the G9, he gives out press conferences. I mean, if he's giving out a press conference, we know where he is, right? And so this National Intelligence Agency obviously isn't going to collect the information on the gangs, but rather on militants, on protesters. And also they've criminalized as terrorism actions that protesters take. And I know we see that in the images, when we see Haiti, they burn tires, right? Through the international media is like, that's violence. I was like, they burn some tires. Like, how is that violent? What are you talking about, right?
It's not against human beings, which is what violence is.
Exactly.
It's destruction of property, but it's not violence.
Exactly. Right. So we see that this is what he's setting up. As you said, instead of addressing people's needs for the basics, right? Water, infrastructure, hospitals, right? His wife is shot and has to be brought to Miami to the hospital.
Because
right?
there's no functioning hospital that can handle that kind of injury.
Exactly, right? Yeah. So people are thinking, right, that you're not doing any kind of work, right? As we're accusing you of all these things to actually, quote unquote, develop. But instead, as you said, right, you're building the security state, right? And you're already laying all the steps for you to be able to steal the next election, including proposing a new constitution that would allow him to run again.
So all this stuff is happening, and the protests are growing and building. And in 2021, there are massive protests against him. I mean, hundreds of thousands in the street. And then international allies start to take place, of which you play a central role. You help coordinate an international coalition of organizations that do solidarity actions all across the United States, also in the Dominican Republic. What are some of the other countries that participate in the international actions?
Essentially, because since you pointed out, right, that there's this international day, and we called it for March 29th, which is the day that the 1987 Constitution was voted in. And this was a piece of document, though, it's not perfect. It's definitely a bourgeois document, but essentially came to capture some of the popular sentiments that people had after 29 years of dictatorship of the Duvalier. And this was the document that was being threatened. It's not because Haitians don't think that there should be a new constitution, particularly thinking about what do we do with the diaspora, right? People like me and you, Max, like what is our role, right? What is our connection to the place? But it's that this person who was already illegitimate was the one who was carrying it, right? And was creating all kinds of ways for him not only to be able to run again, but to potentially not face justice, right? All kinds of loopholes, and to decrease the power that the other branches of the government could have on the executive. So people could see very clearly what his program was. So some of us in the US, in Canada, Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, Uruguay, Argentina, and Brazil came together and decided that, right, this was a moment to step out of just writing statements in solidarity and take actual action and target right sites of power, whether it was a Haitian embassy or consulate or the UN or the Department of the State Department. And in our case in Atlanta, we targeted Coca-Cola for, what I mentioned earlier. Atlanta,
where they had with the President Moïse made all kinds of land available so they could grow stevia, which is a sugar alternative. Yeah,
exactly, for Coca-Cola. So there were events and also in France. France joined us. So there were events in about 12 cities that took place. We wanted obviously more, right? But we got 12 for March 29th.
And so in addition to the cities in the United States, which included New York, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, and a few others, what other cities internationally were there?
We had Ottawa and Montreal in Canada, New York, Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, Miami, Burlington, Vermont, actually. Also, there was
a hotbed of Haitian solidarity action.
Yes. Who would think it?
Yes.
We also had San Juan, Puerto Rico, Santo Domingo, Dominican Republic, Palo Sul and Brasilia, Brazil, Buenos Aires, Argentina, Montevideo, Uruguay, and Paris, France.
Yeah. And you helped organize, of course, this coalition that you facilitated the meetings.
Yes. So the meetings, you were at some of them, Max, were long. And I think this is, what solidarity could look like when you're trying to move. And we moved in 3 languages, so Creole, English, and Spanish. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of weight, to make sure that, I think our people like to speech, they speechify. So giving people room to do that and to get to know each other as well and build, over Zoom to build trust, right? That we are in this together and that we can walk together. And I'm going to tell you, for me, within this coalition, what has been the most impressive or the most touching is how the Dominicans have stepped up, for all the heat they get. I'm like, I don't know, man. Like I have so much.
All the heat they get because of the anti-Haitian laws that exist in the DR, and there are Haitians who are harassed in the street. And
absolutely. Like that. But to have these folks, and many of them people who identify as Afro-Dominicans, right? Mm-hmm. That's important to say. And who take the risk of being called Haitians, right? And even actually one of the
could be dangerous.
Was very dangerous. One of the activists told me that when she went to get her passport, because she's been doing Haiti solidarity work for years, they tried to claim that she wasn't Dominican. Right?
Which could have serious implications. She could lose her citizenship
and be kicked out of the country.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So they take great risks to step up for Haiti, and to be in solidarity with Haiti and to call for hands off Haiti, allow Haiti to decide for itself what it wants. They're actually planning an action this Saturday, 2 caravans coming out of Santo Domingo and Santiago, so the south of the country in the north, going to the border and carrying that same message. We stand in solidarity with the Haitians, and we say, hands off Haiti and let Haitians decide. So for me, that's been tremendous to have this the Dominican solidarity that we came to find in this coalition.
So, Mamyrah, then we have here, there's a tendency, which we talked about very early in our conversation around Baby Doc, Jean-Claude Duvalier, who was the former dictator in Haiti. And then he fled the country in the middle of the night, and then he came back to Haiti. And then when he came back, he was old, he was feeble. Mm-hmm. And there was a bit of first feeling sorry for him because he was old and feeble. And then there was an attempt to rehabilitate kind of his reputation in spite of the human rights violations that he committed, atrocities really that he committed. I get the sense what you just described was a situation where the sitting president of Haiti was getting attacked from all sides. Mm-hmm. The underclass, who obviously needs are not being met. Even the middle class was unhappy with just the day-to-day functions. As functional hospitals were so difficult to find that when his wife was injured, she had to go to Miami.
And
kidnappings. And then, of course, even among the wealthier classes, because of the infighting, which it seems like he was continuing. The only where he doesn't seem to be getting any heat are from people who do not live in Haiti, the United States, France, Canada, etc. In this context, it seemed he was surrounded by enemies on all sides. And then he was on July 7th, 2021, of course, President Moïse was assassinated at his home. Almost immediately afterwards, there was this outpouring of course, there was shock, but there was this outpouring of then some kind of I guess people were regretting some of the bad things they said about him, some of the not bad and inaccurate, but some of the negative things they said about him. But it seems like his reputation is being a bit rehabilitated as well, and now he's being made out to be some sort of a hero. And they're taking the fights he was having with the ruling classes, with the oligarchy, with the wealthy people in Haiti who are exploiting them, and they're turning that somehow into some kind of positive, even though it seems like it could have just been because he was trying to dip his hands also into their pot. So what exactly is going on with the rehabilitation of Moïse at this time, who was by all accounts, except by the countries who benefit from the exploitation of Haiti, by all accounts, this was not someone who was doing a good job.
Right. Yes, actually, when you drive around, I haven't gone outside of Port-au-Prince since July. I was in the north earlier, actually visiting these so-called lands that were empty, where the free trade zone's been placed. And, all over the walls, people were saying, Abba, Moïse, Abba, referendum, which, is down with Moïse, down with this referendum for the Constitution. And today you see instead in Port-au-Prince all kinds of big billboards that say, with these images with him looking very serious, right? That the Haitian dream's been taken away, with your assassination. We love you. There was another billboard that read the diaspora, the Haitian diaspora dream was taken away, with your death. And we see, actually in New York, they're having some vigil today, some prayer vigil for the president. And we've seen, and like as you said, Max, yes, the international community, but also members of the Haitian diaspora who are not clear, right? Who, because they live far away, have come to see protests and massacres as just one continuum of the same thing, right? The masses who are unruly and don't understand what's happening on the ground. And, because the international community said he's the president and he's legitimate, buy into that and are also doing their own propaganda work in the US and Canada and other parts. Even there was a visual held somewhere in Chile for him, and people are demanding justice. And the irony of it is that, there's an expression in Haiti going around that says, which essentially is, a Haitian idiom, a proverb that's saying this is an inside job. That though you have these Colombian mercenaries, Haitian American mercenaries who have been blamed for it, and even some Haitian doctor in Miami who single-handedly was trying to take over the government, which is ridiculous, right? That people are clear that this is an inside job. That not only, yes, there are factions within the oligarchy, but also factions within the party in terms of people who want to take over power. right? And they themselves, even his son during, Jovenel Moïse's son during his speech at the funeral said, my father was surrounded by traitors, right? This is also part of the rehabilitation of his image as a martyr, but it's true, right? That this person could have all these guards, right, paid and trained to protect him, and not one of them is injured in protecting the president, the quote unquote president of the country. And his wife is just conveniently shot in places, and she's already back in Haiti since last week, with her white bodyguards, coming to cry her husband. It just seems real suspicious, right? That, and even the prime minister, who by 7 a.m. had already been circulating an official statement about the assassination and had started pointing. He said, oh, yeah, there were people speaking Spanish. How the hell do you know that? You weren't there. The investigation hasn't happened, but you already knew that people were speaking Spanish. So in an official document was already wanting to point, to make us turn our gaze to something else, right? And it's ironic you say this has been an international breach into Haitian national sovereignty because these foreigners killed our president. Yet you turn around the next day and you say, but the US, can you send some troops to help us with the situation, right? Yeah. And so everyone's thinking, we're not idiots, right? It's very clear that if we don't know who did it, we know they're all lying, right? And this prime minister who decided to stay in power, he was supposed to step down that day and be replaced by Ariel Henry. So this is Claude Joseph. He was supposed to be replaced by Ariel Henry because this would have been, I think, the 8th prime minister that Jovenel Moïse would have had in 4 years, right? He decided, no, I'm staying in power. He declared a state of siege, and the UN representative shook his head and said, you're in charge now. And of course, just last week, the core group, which includes the UN, the US, Canada, France, Spain, Germany, Brazil, and the Organization of American States, they said, okay, well, we changed our mind now. That other illegitimate prime minister who was supposed to step into power is now at the head of the country. And some of the things that Jovenel did right before he was assassinated that people see as an indicator of tensions within the party is that he had, now that he came to control the Court of Audits, he renamed a few people, shuffled a few people. A lot of people, after producing the Petro Caribe report, went into exile. They received death threats, right? So some people left. So he renamed some of these folks. The Court of Audit has just exonerated some key members of the party, including former Prime Minister of Michel Martelly, Laurent Lamotte, who now has a book out, The Hands of Something, with, Sean Penn and Tony Blair have written forwards and endorsed, and he's going around on CNN just talking about how he rebuilt Haiti. I mean, I don't know if you've been here, Max, since 2010. I'm like, where, right? What are you talking about? And he's been exonerated, right? The Court of Audit said, oh, no, he didn't do anything wrong, right? And Laurent Lamotte supposedly wants to run, and Michel Martelly wants to run, right? So now people are saying, there's an infighting within the party about who will be the next candidate. Moïse also issued a presidential decree just like 3 days before he died, discharging all ministers who had served from the period of 1991 to 2017. So he's like, they've done nothing wrong. If there's cases on them, they've been discharged, and now they can be renominated.
He basically gave them a pardon in advance.
Gave them a pardon in advance so that they could run again or be renominated. So we can see that even within the party, there was a struggle for who will be, right, the next presidential candidate. Will it be him? Will it be his wife? Will it be Laurent Lamotte? Will it be Michel Martelly?
So on the top levels, you really have a hot mess where you have all kinds of party officials fighting each other inside of the oligarchy, inside of the wealthy rulers. They're all factioned up and fighting each other. And the countries that are benefiting from Haiti's compromised position, and the companies, Coca-Cola and Levi's and all those others are also positioning themselves. They want to keep Haiti in this condition. Exploit, but this is turning into this is by no means the end. This is not mark some watershed event that ended things.
Exactly.
So yeah. So Mamyrah, let's switch gears a little bit here. This podcast really focuses on organizing, and I think we wanted to have folks get a better understanding of what was happening on the ground in Haiti in the lead up to the assassination of President Moïse, and some of the things that were going on. And you talked a little bit about the organizing that you did to help put together an international coalition that then did protests in support, in solidarity with the protests that were going on in Haiti against President Moïse. So let's talk a little bit more about the organizing that's happening on the ground in Haiti.
Yeah.
So when we talked about your own personal experience, you talked about your father who was imprisoned in Haiti in the 70s, and then you growing up in the 80s, him having discussions with you about your 6-year-old self about Marx, about feminism, and about being able to hold your alcohol.
Yeah.
So really important things to discuss with all children.
Yes.
But I think that raises an important point. What is I think people have questions about what the organizing happening in Haiti. There are organizations, of course, on the ground there who have been protesting against Moïse, but not just against Moïse. The conditions in Haiti preceded him, presumably will persist after him. But so what are some of the organizations in Haiti now who are doing some work, and what are they demanding? What are they asking for? What are their objectives? And both in terms of relationship to Moïse, but also beyond Moïse. Like even if they were making demands of Moïse, it was only because he was president, not because it was Moïse.
Right.
Some of the stuff was particular to him, like step down now because you're an illegitimate president. But some things were not specific to him, such as include access to food and water and housing and things like that. What are some of the things that the organizations there on the ground are demanding, and what are they asking?
Right. So to your point, right, that even though we see in July 2018 and on, there are these massive mobilizations leading up to February 2021, people had been organizing in their communities for decades, right? Part of my research, as I mentioned earlier, is to start out with PAPTA, the Haitian Platform for Advocacy for an Alternative Development. And part of their work is essentially to go throughout the country and connect different social movements, right? The rural to the urban, women's groups, peasant groups, urban-based groups into conversation with one another. One of the activities they did that took place over 3 years, since 2013 up until 2017, was to do what they called a notebook of demands. And that essentially was the culmination of several different workshops and conversations with over 300 organizations throughout the country. And the question was posed to them, right? What do you want, and how do you imagine your own development? So a lot of that work has been done, right, over and over again. And, of course, because the idea was to bring it to the state, right, since the state somehow is incapable of doing this research on its own, and to say that this is what people want, this is what their vision for development is. So these efforts are decades long, right, of connecting with people who are embedded in their communities and talking together about what is our vision for national development. But in the last, none of that stuff gets applied, right? As we said, there's this infighting for power with the blessing of the U.S. to really push for development around, right, extractivist projects, whether we're talking about tourism, mining, because Haiti is rich in all kinds of minerals, gold and copper, and folks are even talking about coltan, which is what we have in our cell phones. Plantations, towards export to make alcohol like Cointreau that some of us like to drink, or bananas and other things. And of course, these industrial garments, that this is the plan for development that the people are saying is not their vision, right? They don't want to simply be low-wage workers, slave wage workers for these big factories so that we in the North can enjoy. They have their own vision for what kind of Haiti they want, what kind of relationship they want with each other, and what kind of relationship they want with the land, right? We're all like, your organic food today is the new craze. It's like, they were like, we've been said that, right? Like, we were already clear about.
Right. Or as we call it in Haiti, food.
Right, exactly. We just called it food. Organic, like, why do you have to put that adjective in front of it? That's what it should always be. And, there were always demands for, can the state support and and irrigation, right? And, when crops fail, because Haiti is experiencing, like the other parts of the Caribbean, deep climate change consequences, right, on the land. So folks are bringing up some of these issues because 53% of our food is being imported, right, from the United States, from the Dominican Republic. And folks are saying, we're fully capable of producing here, but we do need state support, right? So why are you subsidizing $18 million for stevia plantation, but you won't subsidize, right, for us to grow roots vegetables and bananas and other things?
This is an extremely important point, I think, is that there seems to be two sets of demands. One of which is to make Haiti available for industrial projects like stevia for Coca-Cola, or factories that make belts for the Gap, baseballs for Major League Baseball, which most Major League Baseballs are produced in Haiti, as some people know. And those demands in terms of development in Haiti seem to be coming mainly from the United States or from Canada or even from France. But there are also demands, or at least a vision for development that's coming from Haitians, and they seem to be entirely disconnected from those there. And they're saying they do want state subsidies, but they don't want state subsidies for stevia, which people do not consume directly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's an additive to food. It's an alternative to sugar, but it's industrial type sugar. It's not the type of sugar that you put on your cornflakes.
Right.
Then it is there are demands for subsidies, but there's subsidies for things like irrigation, and there's subsidies for things like electricity, and for subsidies for roads that can be used for regular passage, not roads from the port over to the factory. Or
exactly. And
you're saying
schools.
The work has been done, and schools, of course, for education, and the work has been done for identifying, for talking to people both in the city context and also in the rural context to identify what people want or what people see as the path to development. Is that what you're saying?
That is exactly what I'm saying. The work has been done by organizations years before, since 2018 specifically, and I should say since February 2019, when people said, okay, Jovenel Moïse needs to step down. We have had two sets of elections, because what we didn't talk about is how the 2010 election was a sham as well, when Michel Martelly was in 5th place. And essentially the U.S. Embassy came and said, we're going to put him in the second round. And they put him in 2nd place against the candidate that actually had received the votes, right? And so people were like, 2010, you stole the elections, 2015/16, you stole the elections. And that this guy's a thief, this party has stolen all the money, they haven't developed, they just essentially facilitated land grabs. And since February 2019, they've been saying, we want a government of transition. Now, what that means is a little different depending on the sectors, right? The most radical folks are like, this should be a government of rupture. They were using the expression chavirer chaudière, which means to overthrow the system, right? And their idea is that, if you look at groups like Molegaf, movement for liberty, equality, and fraternity, that is based out of Bel Air, Cité Soleil, Matissan, Solino, which are popular neighborhoods. They say, we're
popular,
communists.
Meaning heavily populated. There's
heavily populated, what we call in the States ghettos, quote unquote, right? We're talking about places where it's saturated with folks and there's no infrastructure, there are no schools, right? The places
not saturated with high rise or anything like that. These should be large shanty towns.
Large shanty towns, yes. And so, they are communists. They're actually members of the Fourth International, right? They're Trotskyists, and they're like, we're talking about a full overthrow and, a state that's controlled by the people, right? And then you have, the more progressives, the liberals, right? We call them progressives here, right? Who say a government of rupture so that we can, do democracy better, right? But what everybody agrees with is that they need a break, right, from elections, because elections are rigged and they're controlled from outside. They're like, we don't want to rush, as Biden is proposing, into elections either September or November. That how can you say that the conditions are ripe for elections when there are major neighborhoods where people come out to vote who are under siege by gangs? How are you going to ensure that they're able to vote freely and openly, right? And so we have to address these issues first. And for them, it's about proposing, and so they tried in 2019, 2020 2021, they started actually in February with a commission. It's called Commission to Search for a Haitian Solution to the Haitian Crisis, is what it's called.
Yeah.
And it's probably since 1986, right, when the Duvalier were overthrown, the most inclusive, and, you know, it could be more inclusive, but the most inclusive effort yet to bring people to the table, whether it's urban and rural. But also, you know, there was a moment when there was a fracture on the left in terms of how people understood Aristide. But today, Aristide's party is at the table with these folks, right? So this is a very exciting moment when, right, the left, the general left and the progressives, and even they've included some of the people from this ruling party into the conversation as citizens, right? That they're trying to say, we want a Haitian solution. We want the US and the others to stay away from our process and allow us to legitimately take over. So we're talking about over 400 organizations have signed this document together, representing each one representing 100 to thousands of people. Mm-hmm. So it's not trying to usurp the democratic process by saying, you know, we're going to take over power indefinitely. They're imagining a period of 12 to 18 months of a transition. And the idea is to prepare the country for elections, you know, because they say we still believe in elections as a way to choose our leaders. And so the idea is for them to be able to get rid of this sham government, whether it's Ariel Henry or Claude Joseph, because they're just continuing the logic of this party and they're pushing for elections when they know, A, that the country's not ready for that as far as security levels, but also that they've already rigged it, right, with these national ID cards. And folks are like, we don't want to play this game. And we already know that the US, right, is going to handpick the next leader. And we actually want this leader to emerge from the Haitian population, right? So this commission has been working. They were already working before the assassination. They obviously, you know, accelerated since he's been assassinated.
And they were working before the assassination because they wanted Moïse out. And they wanted this then interim process to
right.
Because
but an interim process chosen by the people, as opposed to what happened after Michel Martelly when people rejected those first elections, that the OAS and Martelly decided who would be the interim. People are saying, no, this should come from the bottom, right?
From the bottom.
And of course, this commission, you know, is controlled by more middle class people, right? Professionals who are, you know, who do this kind of work. So there is some internal tension about how do we make sure that the popular-based organizations are represented. Mm-hmm. But, you know, even in the time I've been here, I've talked to different people. There is some struggle, but people are like, we want to keep sitting at the table.
Yeah.
Right. That we think that we can do better at representing the different voices, but we want to be here at this table today.
So I think this is really important to note that there are, I think we have this impression of Haiti that it's a place where there is not much mass engagement. It really is a bunch of leaders and compromised leaders, to be sure, who are leading Haiti around by the nose, but there actually is mass engagement and organizations and some radical organizations included who are trying to do some on the ground work. Just on the radical organization part, how big do you think the movement, the radical movement, the socialist movement in Haiti is? And is there a difference between the way socialist organizations are able to operate in the city context versus in the rural context? Particularly in the rural context, a lot of the overtly socialist organizations have been subject to extreme violence, even in the during the Aristide days, who was not leftist itself, but shaded left. So how big is that movement, and is there a difference in the way those organizations are able to operate in the city context, in the urban context versus in the rural context?
Right. So the folks in the urban context, I think, have a much clearer, perhaps isn't the correct word, but they leverage, you know, the language of Marx and communism, right? I'm talking about folks who are like, we're members of the Fourth International. But of course, there's sort of a double speak that happens. It's much like the work that Haitian feminists do. When they go out to the rural areas, you'll never hear them talk about feminism, right? They'll talk about femme jum, strong women. And there's a way that people it's not necessarily to hide the agenda, but it's to connect to already existing realities that people have that resemble what we talk about when we say communism, right? So for example, combit, which is a labor sharing practice, right? Where if Max has a land, Mamyrah will come work on it for free and return for some food, and then you'll come work on my land, right? That there are all kinds of ways that people are already practicing out of the resistance to the plantation model under colonialism, forms of being together that look like what we're talking about when we say communism.
This is an existing practice, and it's been given a name.
Yes.
And the name is separate from Marxist language that is popularly used, but actually, in practice, when you look at it, they're very similar or identical.
Absolutely. And even folks, who were properly communist, if you will, like if we think about Jacques Roumain in the early 20th century, who was a Marxist, what he did eventually, because he was an anthropologist, and when he went to study the Haitian peasantry, came to shift in terms of the language he was using to look at combit as an expression of this kind, a Haitian form of Marxism or communism, right? Yeah. And that wasn't coming from some high theory place or out of Europe, but emanating from the people themselves, right? Mm-hmm. That it was something similar, but different, right? That and so a lot of the peasant-based organizations, they may not leverage the language today of communism or socialism, though some do. For example, I'm very close to a party that clearly says, it's a socialist party. But when they move out in the rural areas, you're not going to hear the members talk about socialism or communism, but they're going to talk about combit, right? They're going to talk about the laku, which is another kind of system that has endured the colony and even the post-colony, which is a very different way of setting up family, right? So people are living on collective lands, right? Most people don't have land titles, right? You know that you've been here for hundreds of years. You share the land, you share the produce, you share the childcare, right? That people come together to, worship ancestors. And so there are already these sort of communist ways that exist, especially in the rural areas, that people are able to take back with them in the urban. Because, it's not like there's this division. The people who are the residents of the popular neighborhoods are direct descendants of these rural folks, right? Who were attracted to the city, brought in, especially under the Duvalier era, because they said, we're going to make garment industries and we need workers. So they evicted them from the land, and then they brought them to live in these neighborhoods, right? Without infrastructure, without any kind of social services. And these people have obviously, grown up here, but they come with the same kind of understanding and idea of how humans should relate, right? Which in the end, that's what we mean when we're talking about communism, is changing human relations from transactional and exploitative to something healthier, right? And so, how to measure whether the socialists and the communists have great ground? If you're looking for them to define themselves that way, then you'll say they don't have ground, right? But if you look at communism, under this Haitian lens, then you'll see that it's well and alive and already being practiced. And in these notebooks of demand, for example, that PAPTA was able to do, you will see that that's the vision that's coming out of their idea of development. And they never call it communism. Right?
Socialism. So, and that's interesting because it's, of course, what Kwame Nkrumah and Sekou Touré, who was presidents of Ghana and Guinea, respectively, talked about socialism with an African personality. And I think, I guess I wonder, do you think there are lessons here for organizers in the U.S. who want to radicalize communities that they're organizing, but are insisting on using certain terminology?
Yes.
That residents of those neighborhoods may not be familiar with, or maybe strange.
I think that's an excellent connection that you're making, Max, that I think some of us are, wedded to these terms, and we want everybody to be speaking Marx. And I think it's important, to do the theoretical work and to get people thinking that way, and to also make connections with other territories struggling, and to know that the fight is international, but also that there are realities already existing in people's past. Even this idea of combit exists in the African American, what they call the Negro Gardens, right? That people were already doing this combit-like work, that it's, maybe it's something African about us, or maybe it's because we were all subjected to the plantation and had to figure out how to survive it, and we made these collective efforts, whatever, right? Whether you want to
maybe collectivism is actually the only thing that works.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
that is actually really automatically, coming out of us as humans, right?
Right.
That we have to learn individualism.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So those things already exist even within African American culture and
Yeah.
history. So you don't have to reinvent it and shove marks down people's throats.
So if then these ideas already exist and they're emerging and these organizations are working around these ideas, what is keeping them from being implemented in Haiti? Why are they not being used? Why are they not being why are we not seeing these solutions coming up when we talk?
Because they don't have guns. They have the words,
who
they
has
have
the
the
guns?
documents. What the gangs have the guns. The gangs actually are more well armed than the Haitian police, right? So that's just like absurd, right? So the gangs have the guns. The UN, when they were militarily much more present, had the guns, and the
And there's
leftists.
still UN is still present, just not as strong militarily.
Not as strong militarily,
Yeah.
but in terms of impact on civil society, right, to the NGOs and sitting in the core group that really oversees the state, very much present in that way. But I think that's the problem, and I've said this, and unofficially people have these conversations because people are like, well, how is this commission? If it's like one of the most inclusive efforts that wants to put together this interim government, how are they going to actually take it over if the US continues to say otherwise, right? And that's the big question. How, when there isn't a revolutionary armed force that's ready to force the implementation of this commission or this plan, and and it's not particularly Haiti, we're all on the left caught up in this democratic turn, nonviolence, that's how we do the work now, where it's passé to talk about revolution, with guns, and we do it with, I don't know, documents.
But in the final analysis, there's no way to really move some of those programs without the ability to implement your idea. And if someone else has the ability to stop it, then they end up stopping it. In the same way, as we talked about Moïse, President Moïse was extremely unpopular among almost all sectors that had to deal with Haiti, except the only one that really mattered, and that's the ones who could bring in the big guns, and that's the United States, Canada, France.
And I think there are non-violent things, sure, that we could do, right? So one of the things Haitians have asked the international community, the real friends, right? Not the UN, the US, the governments, right? But the people in the United States and Canada and France, is to obviously organize from within, right? So it could be things from protesting sites of power, right, which is confrontational, but it's also what I was talking about. How do we lift up the convict practices that are already existing in the US, right? And how do we ask people, stop drinking Coca-Cola and stop eating the fucking poison? Because part of the US American taste also drives the capitalist machinery. That the fact that we want to dress, every weekend, go shopping, and that we're eating all these products that are coming from elsewhere is also legitimizing empire, our reliance on petrol. So we have to do the work also within the belly of the beast to reimagine and redesign our societies. I will give the example of COVID. I mean, Haitians have not been impacted by COVID the way that the US has. And part of that has to do with, I'm not that kind of scientist, right? But yes, we have an extremely young population, but these are people who are extremely mobile, always walking, always in the sun. They're not cooped up in AC-filled buildings all the time. They're not eating processed foods from McDonald's and et cetera. That's part of the organizing work we have to do in the States is how do we get the people off that crack? How do we get people eating right from the land? How do we, demystify people's ideas about living in these buildings in these saturated cities and back to the South? I don't know. I think those are conversations we need to have. And, how do we boycott Coca-Cola? Coca-Cola is not just messing with Haiti. They're messing with Palestine. They're messing with Colombia, right? That these multinationals are just that, right? They are what we mean when we say U.S. empire, and the struggles need to be connected in that sense. I think that all those are ways that we can organize in the United States outside of Haiti that actually have impact back on Haiti.
Mm-hmm. All right,
and there's one thing I wanted to say there. There is an effort today to organize an international delegation in order to help stop these elections, right, as another way of...
Stop the elections that the United States is saying should happen this fall.
Yes, exactly. And the international delegation would be one that is composed of movement people. We're not talking about, Black Caucus type of thing. Right. We're talking about movement people, not just, hey, come visit Haiti and then write a statement, but also for movements to start reconnecting, right? That Haiti tends to be isolated and disconnected because people look at it and they're like, oh, we don't understand it. It's so complicated. Well, it's not very complicated. It's very clear. And folks want to reconnect with movements, particularly Black organizations in the US. So I want to use this platform to put it out there. The dates haven't been set yet, but we've been working on, I'm also in that effort, just different than the coalition I mentioned earlier. It's another group of folks. And the idea is to have really a delegation. If it can't be, include the Europeans and Africans and Asians, but certainly be Pan-American in scope. And so we hope that people will come and will participate and reconnect.
So this is very interesting that one of the demands that seem to be coming out of here is actually not to have elections right now.
Yes.
Because elections could be harmful. And of course, it's just going to end up benefiting those who already
exactly.
have all their hands on the levers of power and therefore could rig the election
exactly.
Easily here.
Exactly.
So the demand here is not to have elections immediately.
Exactly.
But
and to have a government of transition/rupture that would prepare the ground in a year to a year and a half's time for elections that could be done fairly and openly.
I think this is very interesting and also challenges the idea many of us have that elections are always the answer to. So for those of us who are movement people and we're interested in Haiti and we've been trying to follow what's happening in Haiti, but have difficulty doing so, and we want to be supportive of the work that's going on the ground, particularly of some of the more radical or progressive elements there, how do we do that? How do we from the United States or from Canada or from anywhere else, how do we support actual grassroots movements that are going on there or some of these combits or some other way of supporting everyday people in Haiti?
Right. The first thing is what you're doing, Max, already, right, is to clarify. The more that we can shift the discourse internationally and not allow the rehabilitation of Moïse and the obscuring of what people are actually asking for, right? So most immediately, no, we do not want elections, but we want this government of transition. We support this commission in whatever forms that may be, right? Whether you're, letter writing to your congressman, because, I know that's the thing, or you're protesting, right, in front of the sites of power like the U.S. State Department, or participating in supporting this international delegation in whatever way. So showing up on the ground, or whatever work the international delegation will do afterwards, participate in that. For me, more specifically, with Community Movement Builders, we are supporting the People's Camp, the Roots of the People's Camp Party. It's difficult to translate. It's a socialist organization, a socialist party. It actually includes the director of PABDA. So, right, that PABDA does research and connects, with different organizations on the ground, community-based organizations, but it functions in that way.
And this is a political party which is going to be vying for power in Haiti.
Yes. They're still building power. So one of the projects that we have is actually in the center of Haiti to do a headquarters, but that would also be a community center, et cetera, right? So those are sort of concrete things that we're doing. How do people sort of establish their presence physically also in the town? Because one of the things that the political parties, are underfunded. So how do you make sure that you're seen and that people have a place to go to and have continual access to you? So that's something that we're doing. And part of what this party wants to do is practice, right, the model of power that it claims it wants to, instate once it has control of the state, right, which is cooperative development, right, which is, I'm just using that language because this is how, what we use in the States, but what they call solidarity economy. And so that's one of the things that I support. One of the major things for Haitians today is the fact, and we know this in the States too, that the media, especially radio in Haiti, which is still more important than television, which is still more important than social media, because people have problems with electricity and access to data, the radio is still something, you could throw in some batteries in the radio and you can listen in, is that the media is controlled, right, by the government and the oligarchs, and that there's a call for funding an alternative leftist radio station that would have national scale and be able to bring the message of socialism and communism, in Haitian terms. So that's something that I'm not a great fundraiser. So, I told them, I was like, I'm going to try,
But these are projects that people could find, identify, and find,
yes.
and then support.
Yes. And so this radio is very key for them. So for example, when I mentioned how the decree for these 8,000 acres for stevia for Coca-Cola, one of the things that Andrea Ped did, the oligarch who's controlling the plantation, there's also rumors that he's growing marijuana towards the production of CBD, but that has not been confirmed yet. I will, we will confirm. What he did was he bought out all the radio stations. And they're only playing his commercials saying, we're developing and we're giving jobs and this is going to be great and blah, 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 this is going to bring development. And so the folks organizing locally, they've been shut out. They can't bring their message. They can't warn the people. They can't explain what really this free trade zone is going to do. And so I was at a meeting earlier in June with these groups of folks, and that was the first ask. And I was like, well, if there's any kind of international solidarity, it has to be at least a local radio station that can fight back. And if we can have it nationally, then, we can do the work. Yeah. Especially when you can't travel across the country freely because the metropolitan area, Port-au-Prince, is the connector between the South and the center and the North. If you have gangs that control all around, the people in the South can't get to the North and they can't get to the center. And it's breaking people's ability to communicate and to travel and to meet. And Zoom is not the solution, right? People can't say, well, we can't meet in person. We'll just send a link and, we'll talk, right? The radio continues to be the most important tool, especially now that the territory is controlled by gangs, to do the work.
All right. So then there's work to be done around supporting the ability of radical or progressive organizations to get their message out.
Yes.
All right. So Mamyrah Prosper, the International Coordinator for Community Movement Builders out of Atlanta, Georgia, and the Assistant Professor of Global and International Studies now at the University of California, Irvine. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Max. Yes.
That was part 2 of our conversation with Mamyrah Prosper. Thank you for listening to The Next World. I'm Max Rameau. You can find out more about Mamyrah's work at communitymovementbuilders.org. And you can find out more about one of the organizations Mamyrah talked about, PAPDA, or the Haitian Advocacy Platform for Alternative Development, at papda.org. That's papda.org. And you can find out more about my work at pacapower.org. That's pacapower.org. And you can read more about the sponsor of this show on the Partners for Dignity and Rights website, dignityandrights.org. Until then, please tell your friends about us and help spread the word about this podcast. Goodbye for now, and remember, organize, organize, organize.